Hey guys, I thought it might be a good idea to start putting my process out there for some of my paintings. I have a lot of paintings. I have a lot of photos and videos and different things of many of the paintings that I've painted. And I felt like they were all just sitting on my phone or sitting in my iCloud, not doing anything. And I don't know why I took them necessarily, maybe one day to share, but I thought maybe I would start going through my favorite paintings and going and seeing what kind of process I have and talking about it, just like in a casual format. So that's what I'm going to start doing. This is kind of an experiment. This is the first one, and I am here with my good friend and also what would we call our relationship? Colleague, sort of.
I'm your assistant. I'm the behind the scenes working with you, which I'm so honored to be doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
this is
So this is Sarah Lorenko, and we've been working together for almost a year and a half now,
a
right?
year and a half coming up
Yeah,
into.
so Sarah randomly reached out to me
Mhm.
when, I don't know, like I was kind of at this point where there was a lot of like business stuff that I felt like I wasn't sure how to do. And so I was a little bit like, I could use some help. And then randomly I got this email from Sarah. I didn't know who she was, but she was like, hey, I'm a follower on Instagram. I love your work. And I started this company and I help artists do all of their business stuff under, not just like do the stuff but also like strategize. And so
Mm.
it sounded interesting to me, and I was like, huh, okay. So I did an intro call with her and I really adored her and so signed up and started doing working with her, and here we are a year and a half later. We're still working together, but we're also good friends. So yeah, that's, I guess, my intro to Sarah. But Sarah, I'll let you talk about yourself a little bit.
Yes, no, that's the story. I was following you for a while. I loved your work, and then I reached out to be like, hey, if you need some help, like in the business side, because it tends to be a pain point for artists, not only in doing the business side, but even having someone to spar ideas, to like bounce back and forth, strategize, and even just like swap emotional experiences of, what it's like to be an artist and to try to, have a career out of that. So I remember reaching out, and then I remember us having an intro call, and there was like a definite like it was a good match. Like there was a click. And fortunately, like friendship developed through that because, throughout the years we go through a lot of things like testing, business, life, and yeah, so we've developed a really good friendship. So it's really exciting
Yeah.
to be working
Yeah,
together.
I'm so glad. I mean, when I first got your email, I was like, is this real? Like, because you get a lot of those things where people are reaching out to you. But it sounded legitimate. It didn't sound like, like a bot or anything like that. I was
I
like, I
know.
looked at your website, I looked at your Instagram, and I was like, she seems really cool. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest fear of like reaching out, like which I don't do usually, clients come to me like out of reference or word of mouth, but like I don't know, I decided to reach out, but I was thinking like, oh, she's probably going to think I'm just like this random person like marketing because I get emails like that every day as well. They're like, "Hey, do you need help?" And I'm like, "Mm." So, but I'm
Hmm.
glad this worked out. Like I don't know, when things are meant to be, they happen.
I
So,
think so. I really think it was meant to be. I really do.
yeah, it worked out well. And I'm really excited
Yeah.
about this, like of you sharing more about your process. Where did the idea come from? What gave you that?
Well, we were talking about doing these weekly emails or these bi-weekly emails for my subscriber list, just to start promoting some of the paintings that I have, my available paintings. I was thinking about one of them, and I went into my photo history on my phone for that painting just to
Mhm.
see did I have any shots of it like in progress, like with my easel. Sometimes it's nice to have like you have your still life set up and then the painting on the easel and then the
Mm.
palette. I like to do a lot of those. I was like, maybe I have this. And I went and I looked through and I found not just a few good ones like that, but I found some really adorable videos that I took of me color mixing with this one, and not the painting that we're going to talk about today, and it was a different one. And I was color mixing, and my daughter was standing there with her cute little voice. This was like a year and a half ago. So she was 3. I think she was 3. So she had an even cuter voice. And so I'm standing there color mixing for this painting, and she's asking me questions. I'm asking her questions about the color mixing, and it ended up becoming a little lesson in color theory. And I was like, I have this video of a 3-year-old understanding color theory and like wanting to explore. And I was like, this is so cute, and I need to share this stuff. So I thought
Mhm.
maybe I could. I created this artist newsletter that I have yet to really send out.
Mhm. I love the idea because I mean it's so innovative. Like you really think outside the box because like when we think of newsletters, we always think of just the written format. And you're like, no, let's record something, add it to it where people can like receive it in their emails, listen to the process about it. I thought it was genius and very generous as well, because it's so nice. Like a lot, I don't see a lot of artists like showcasing the behind the scenes of the process, like especially what's posted on social media tends to be more for like entertainment.
Yeah.
Um, here it is, with the music, the editing, and everything. But talking about the process, I think it really enhances the intellectual value of artists because artists ha tend to have like very specific genius of creating art through, inspiration, subjective concepts, or whatever they're feeling to materialize that. But it's not talked about enough. And that's why a lot of people think that being an artist is a glorified hobby and they don't want to pay for it well, because like, oh, you just sit down and make it. But there's a process behind it. There's an intelligence. So I love like that you're wanting to talk more about it. It's
Yeah.
exciting.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, it seems like very natural to me, which I guess is, uh, I've been searching for like ways to promote. I mean, I struggle with promoting my work. I struggle with promoting myself. It's not only is it scary, but what I see other people doing doesn't feel natural to
Hmm.
me. I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do that, but I want to do things that feel natural to me and that work
Yeah.
with what I guess my personality, how my
Yeah.
personality is.
Yeah. I love it. Finding what works for you, formats. Like there are infinite ways to do something. We get stuck in what we see as working for other people, but just thinking
Yeah.
outside the box, and there you go. That's what works
Yeah.
for you. Yeah. So
Yes.
about this
Okay.
artwork, she loves this light. Um, so okay, let's get into this. Like, first of all, like describe this painting. Like,
Yes. I'm going to share it. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So this is a painting of my Monstera plant that I painted when I lived in Texas. It was not too long before I moved, but this Monstera plant had a little bit of a journey. We had gotten it maybe a year before or a year and a half before, and it was like a small little thing. And my husband went on, he got a little bit excited about having more plants in our house. He was like, we need more plants in our house. So he propagated it and turned it into 2 plants. So this is one of the 2 plants, and it had started growing and it was sitting in this window. And every time I would pass by, I would see, whenever it was backlit and all the green leaves there were just like these beautiful, like glowing green colors. Actually, I'll share an image of the picture that I took. And I took this picture because, okay, so here's another thread to the story. I had just started working with Felicia Forte doing her creativity coaching. And I specifically wanted to work with her to help me get ready for the show that I was doing that I did last year. And I had another artist that was in the show with me, so it was kind of like a duo show, but it was the two of us, and I was going to have a lot of pieces to hang, and they needed to all work together as a series. And so she had started coaching me on like trying to help me learn how to understand my own inspiration, like what inspires me and what do I get excited about painting. Because at the time I was feeling just kind of bored with my still life paintings. I was bored with just like setting something up on a table in my studio and lighting it and then painting it. I was like, this is not interesting to me anymore, or at least right now. And so she had me start documenting when I felt like excited about painting. So this was one of the photos that I took for that process. I was like, ooh, I want to go paint this. It was shortly after that that she helped me realize that I needed to get out of my studio and start painting in other places, like not just confining myself to painting in my studio all the time. And so she challenged me to, I guess she gave me a homework assignment. She was like, you need to go paint somewhere. It can be in your home, but it needs to be outside of your studio, somewhere else. In one of these, like, go to the place that where you're getting the inspiration. Don't bring it into your studio. Go to it and paint there. And I really liked that prompt. And so this was the first. I did it several other times for several other paintings, but this was the first one that I did where I was like, okay, I'm leaving my studio. I'm going to go paint this plant.
Mhm. The prompt of getting out of the studio, that's so interesting because like inspiration does find you when you're a little bit out of your comfort zone. So
Mm-hmm.
it's nice you did find inspiration outside of a structured, predictable setting. Was that hard, like at first?
Uh, yeah, it was, I mean, so what's challenging about painting outside the studio is more logistical than anything else for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not like the actual painting part was fine. Like it
Okay.
wasn't much different than painting in my studio because I paint from natural. I mean, I was painting from natural light, and I do that in my studio a lot. And so it felt pretty similar, except that I didn't set anything up. This was just here like
Mm.
this. I think I removed the other plant, like I just left one on the windowsill, and that's all I did to it. I walked around it and I was like, I had my little viewfinder and I was like, where do I want to stand? What do I want my composition to be? And that, that's pretty much how I and I guess a very simplified version of how I would plan for a still life setup in my studio. So I mean, the logistical aspects of it that were hard were, um, I didn't really have a plein air. I mean, I had a plein air box at the time, but I didn't like it. So I was like, oh, I got to use this thing. And I ended up bringing a table, my palette table, into my living room. I'll actually share my screen. So this was how I set it up. So I brought my palette table into the living room and into this little spot in the foyer. So the front door is like right over here. And this was my planner box that I don't like, but I didn't want it on a one of those tripods because it would tend to like shake a little bit. So I just put it
Mhm.
on top of my table, and let me keep moving through this. There's a I took a photo of it. So I didn't paint it backlit, like in the inspiration photo. Maybe I should have. The reason I chose not to was because it was direct light. And I was like,
Mhm.
that is gonna be fleeting. That's not gonna stay for very long. And so
Mm.
I decided to paint it from the side. because I thought the color, I felt like the colors, there were a lot of beautiful colors, and I liked the space, like the negative space in the background. So that's a picture of like the composition that I was planning to paint. And here's more of
Mm-hmm.
the setup. Okay, so I had my planner box here, and then I had my little glass palette here. And I don't think I took a picture of this. You see a little bit of a tripod there. So that's my light. So that's the tricky part when you leave the studio is the lighting. I find I need to make sure I'm in a well-lit space, but I don't want my lighting to compete with what I'm painting. And so I have like this uplight. It's like a new, I think it's like 4,500 Kelvin, and it shines up at the ceiling, and so it washes over all of this light in the space so that my easel can be lit really well, but I don't have like glare, direct light, and like stuff that is undesirable. So
Mm-hmm.
this probably took me the most time. Like I spent a while that morning setting all this up, and I was like, oh, I need to put a drop cloth down because I'm not in my studio and I actually
Mm-hmm.
don't want to get paint on the floor. It's like all these little things. Let's see. This is another picture of the process. What was something that was fun about it was my husband, this was like still kind of COVID-y. It was still
Mm-hmm.
COVID-y timing. He was still working from home. And so he was at the countertop working, and Avery was playing. I guess she didn't have school this day, maybe. I don't know. But she was there. So she must have been home for something. And then the dog. So I'm like in there with them, which usually I'm like walled off by myself in my painting space. So that was nice.
It gives a different experience, like to painting, because sometimes we get in
Mm-hmm.
the rhythm of just, going into the studio where this is how I paint, and we control the settings, and I
Yeah.
don't know, gives the
Yeah.
artwork a
I mean,
different
it was more
different process.
interactive. It was like kind of fun.
Yeah.
Having Avery. I mean, Avery was kind of excited, like, "Ooh, mommy's in the living room. Ooh, there's an easel in the living room."
It was different for her.
Yeah.
Okay, so the development, because like I'm seeing in the picture, like, Sarah, how do you go through the process? Like, how were you like thinking of like the color, the tones, the composition? Like, what were the phases?
So I don't have a ton of of process photos of this one. So, but I'll walk through these images of what I do have. I mean, my process generally, I kind of have the same. It's like the general process. It doesn't always go exactly the same every time, but I like to think in layers of paint. And so my first layer is I think of it as my underpainting, and I try to get like a sketch of the overall composition. Um, and my biggest, like, kind of a notan, which is just a black and white, like the design of the darks and lights. And I think of it as shadow and light. So I put down like a big shape of wherever my shadow is, and I connect them all together. So I'm not thinking about like pot versus stem versus table. I'm thinking about like one big shape. So that's my underpainting, which I don't have a picture of it, unfortunately. And then the next layer is, I think of my big shapes layer. So it's like I start bringing in color, but I'm thinking about big blocky, blocks of big average colors throughout the painting. So I'll look at my shadows and I'll block in my, some big, like big areas. It's not the whole shadow shape, but it's like, if I'm seeing like a whole lot of green differentiated from some like neutral color, like I'm looking at this green shape. This is actually what my big shape layer was looking like. So this is like I'm seeing this as separate from this. And so I'm like, okay, well, on average, what's the color of this whole big hunky thing of green versus like this whole thing of like dark neutral? and I paint that. But I kind of go around the whole canvas and I do that. So that was my second layer, and then my third layer, this is still second layer. I guess I took a lot of pictures of it at the same phase. So this is a close up of what it was looking like. What's nice about this piece is that I'm painting on Arches oil paper, which is not, it's not on a panel. So I can make it any size later that I want. And so you can see me sort of, initially I might have been thinking, oh, it's going to be a smaller painting, but then I think it got bigger, the size of the canvas, as I started painting different areas and thinking about, well, where do I want the edges of the canvas to end?
Mhm.
So we keep going. Okay, so this is, I'm getting into my third layer, which is after I've done that big shape layer, I start looking at those shapes and start breaking them into smaller shapes. And so like you see here, like this was probably one big shape, and then I broke it down. There's this color that's a little bit darker, maybe a little bit warmer than this, which is a little bit lighter, a little bit cooler. Trying to find like these different areas where these different shapes are feeling different. There's a lot more. I think I had probably done a lot more work in the pot and seeing the different shapes and colors in the pot, in the negative space and the table. So this is layer 3, which is like, I call it's like the actual painting layer. Like this is where most of the painting happens. Most of the decisions are made. This was later, but not finished, or maybe this was finished. This doesn't look like, this wasn't finished. This doesn't look like the finished piece, but I was getting closer. But I was still on layer 3. I think I hadn't cleaned up, I I will take pictures, when I'm starting to get close to finishing a piece, I'll take pictures of it and look at it on my phone and like crop it out and everything so that I can see it. I'll leave the room and I will look at it and think about like, what do I feel is working? What's glaring at me? What do I need to fix? So I think that's probably what this photo was like, I was getting close, but I wasn't quite done. And I was like, I need fresh perspective on the piece. So my brushwork is like, some of the things that are bothering me looking at it now, like the brushwork seems a little bit like busy. I'm seeing a lot of like stuff in here that I'm kind of, even right now, I'm like, ooh, I just want to go like clean that up a little bit. But overall, like if I squint and look at it right now, it's like, it's the form, the space, like everything is feeling good about it. I like the composition overall, and so it just needs to be brought to a level of finish where like it doesn't look finished right now. It doesn't feel finished to me. It feels like there's still more to be desired from the painting.
I think it looks beautiful. Like to see the steps. Like I'm very impressed how you're able to simplify everything that we see like with the naked eye, like all the details. And then I'm like, okay, let me with like through layers, simplifying shapes, values, and that be a like your process of painting. And then you start having fun because I feel like your fun is adding the details, but your interpretation. So like it's 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 not like the details of the window or the background or even like the designs on the leaves. But I start seeing like the little brushstrokes, which you mentioned looks busy. But I feel like, oh, that's probably when you're starting to have fun because you see certain colors and then you're like painting it in.
Yeah, you're so right. Like you're able to, there comes a point in the process, and that is in layer 3 for me. It's not layer 2.
Okay.
I really do think in layers. I'm like thinking about like I wouldn't let myself start doing that in layer 2 because layer 2 is not about that. Layer 2 is about getting shapes and composition. It is a lot about composition. So making sure that like where things are like the right size and shape. The color, it's about color harmony, it's about value and relationships and all that, but it's about big, simple, not a lot of information. And then here is it's like as you're moving into this layer and getting closer and closer, it just things start to get more you know that the value's right, the color's right, you know that the placement on the canvas is right, that the proportion, the drawing, everything's right, but you're like, how do I want this paint in this spot to feel or be? And do I want more information? Because I have to start thinking about how am I guiding? I mean, there's composition, there's composition in this as well, where you're guiding the eye around the canvas and you don't want to put more information in an area that's not really all that interesting. Like, I wouldn't add a bunch of detail to the window and to the like, there were all these in the window frame. There's like all these cracks, like all these openings and different things in there. It's like that doesn't matter. That stuff's not important. I'm going to paint the parts of that stuff that make it I mean, I want the viewer to kind of know what it is right away when they look at it, but that's it. Like, and there's some compositional aspect of like there's this like strong vertical line right there, and that's important to show, but like you don't need to keep saying over and over again, this is a windowsill, or this is a window frame, this is a window frame. Like you don't need to put all that into it. You want to bring the attention into the plant. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about as I'm going in here, I'm doing it really slowly. Like I'm trying to look at my painting each time I step back and look at my painting with a fresh perspective. So, kind of want to be able to see it if I were to see it for the first time, like where do I think it needs more work? Or where do I think maybe it needs more information or less information?
You have a favorite part or that, yeah, do you have a favorite part in the painting that you really enjoyed like focusing on?
Um, yeah, I think so. I think one of the areas that I struggled a little bit was with the pot,
Oh,
but
okay.
I also resolved it. So this isn't how it looks in the end. This is more the end. Yeah, this is more like when I was done.
Hmm.
Um, and it was more around brushwork. That's what I struggled with. It wasn't the color, the shapes, or anything like that. It was more just like how to,
Mm.
because it's this like neutral object, like light neutral object, and it's got this light that's coming through. That's actually kind of warm light. I mean, cool light. It looks warm, but it's really not warm. And
Hmm.
but it's shining on this pot, and the pot is kind of like a warmish, like the local color is like a warmish white.
Yeah.
And but as it transitions around, like this is cool light, but this is cool light. So there was something that was
Mm.
challenging about it, because this light, there's actually on the other side of the room there was another window. And so it's like the opposite direction. So it's like I had light coming in from both sides. I think the light over there was cooler. Maybe it was like late in the day, and this was the cool light coming from the south, because this is the south direction of that house, and this is the north direction. So maybe that, I don't
Mm.
know. Or no, sorry, I got it wrong. This was the north direction on the left side. This is the north, and this is the south. So you get
Mm.
more like warmth from there. But anyway, so that was kind of challenging, was like figuring out that, and then the brushwork, it was just like, it's kind of for me kind of like a big space on the canvas to be softening trying to create like a gradation, which is something that like at that time I hadn't actually been working on that skill a lot. Um, I I was often challenged by like having to create more like soft gradations, how color transitions from one color to another color. So I that was something that I was kind of struggling with, but at the same time I was enjoying that discovery of just like figuring it out and seeing it come to life. And
Mm-hmm.
then another area that I guess the other two areas that I really enjoyed was like this dark negative space here and then this light area here. Like those
Mm-hmm.
two were very satisfying to once I had these two areas resolved from like a value and color perspective and I had them in the piece. It was like very clear what where the painting needed to go. So it was really satisfying to like put those in and then just be like, oh, okay, I know what this painting needs to be and what it needs to do. So
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed this area too of the painting, but and this one even.
Mm-hmm. There's something about it which I know it's not, but it looks like a monochromatic painting like that, even the light from the window, the color in the leaves, the vase, the white part of the windowsill, and then like the negative, apart from the wood, which is a support for the plant, like everything feels like so somewhat monochromatic. And I think it's so interesting how like working within the same color range, and yet we can still see distinctly what is what. Like a window, the windowsill, a background, because there's so many value variations of green
Yeah.
and the cooler lights, like you're saying, but yet you really distinguished everything. I know what's a leaf, what's a stem, what's the dirt, even though some of the same shadowing in the stems, like it's on the vase of the pot, but it's very, very well done, like the details.
Yeah, thank you. I think a lot of that is temperature. I mean, it's temperature and it's value. But like
Mm,
our brain knows that when we see like not we and we don't know, we're not aware of this. But
mm,
when we see a leaf in direct light, diffused light, but direct light
mm-hmm,
is going to be cool. It's going to be like a cool green or almost like a blue green. And I only know that because I'm a painter and I've painted it a bunch of times and realized, like, oh, it's always like this. And as soon as you get that
mm,
cool green on there, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that leaf just came to life. Like, but our brain is so used to seeing that. And it's so used to seeing underneath the leaves that are lit, even
mm,
they're going to be warmer and they're going to be darker. And the more saturated they get, the more we know that there's light. You know, they're kind of like translucent. So we learn these things.
mm,
As artists, you just learn them by doing it over and over again and you realize. But yeah, and that's part of what makes this so satisfying to look at because it's so
mm.
simple. But it's like, oh yeah, okay, these are the colors of a monstera plant.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
talk about bit about my color palette, like what colors I painted with, and I
Yes.
think it was limited. It was a three primary limited palette with some bonus colors, which is partially what probably why the colors feel so harmonious. So I painted it with cad yellow, cad red, ultramarine blue, radiant violet, and king's blue. So this is king's blue, which I think has a little bit of phthalo in it. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lighter blue. It's like a cool blue, and I love painting with this. It's a really nice addition. This is radiant violet, which is just it's from Gamblin. It's just dioxazine purple with white added to it. And it gets up to like a value on my value card, it would be like a value 4. So it's a little bit lighter, but it's also nice to have around. It helps to cool to like have like a cool purpley feel in the lights. This is titanium white. This is the cad yellow. This is the cad red. And this is the ultramarine blue. So it was a fairly limited palette. Like this was the main palette. And then I had these as like bonus colors in the lights.
Mm.
But whenever you paint with just three primaries, and your colors will be really harmonious. It's like automatic color harmony. These like the cad red and the ultramarine blue, they neutralize each other to a
Mm-hmm.
degree. So that's why the painting is so almost like a monochromatic feeling because it's just so muted.
Yeah. Like it's far from like tedious or boring. You know what I'm saying? It's actually very,
One of the things that is just so wonderful about working with a limited palette, I think when you are an artist that has never worked with a limited palette, instead of mixing colors, you just buy all the colors and you have them on your palette. There is something that is comforting about that because you might be freed from having to figure out how to mix your colors, and so you can just get what you want. Like if you start working this way, initially there's like a bigger learning curve. So it might take a little bit more time as you're figuring out like, oh, like I don't have any greens. I'm going to have to mix my greens. I don't have any purples. I have to mix my purples. But once you get over that hump, it's actually, I find it to be so easy. It's so easy and liberating. It's like, that's the reason why I chose a three primary limited palette here, was because I was going out of my comfort zone. I was leaving my studio. I was going to be like painting in a different space. And I was like, what can I do to make it easier on myself? Oh, I'm just going to have a very limited palette so that I don't have to think about color mixing very much. Whenever I have a split primary palette or even more colors than that, I I have to think more. I have to be a little bit more intentional whenever I'm like, oh, more red, I have to be like, well, which red? Which red should I add into this pile? Whereas here, it's like more red. Oh, there's only one red to pick. This one.
that's true.
So I've talked about everything except for the outcome of the painting. We sort of talked about it. Is there anything else about it that we need to talk about?
I think so. I think again, that's what I'm saying. The more I have a connection, like either with the artist or understanding more about the art, I just see like the beauty in every detail from the process, from how you see it and why you're making the decisions to, call it final or to keep on working on it. And I look into the details as well because you're very wise in your choice of brush strokes. Like you simplify all the details that we're seeing, but it's so thought out. And I even look for the little ones where I'm like, ooh, like I know she thought about this one, even that's a tiny little different shade, And for someone like me where I don't even like I need to develop my skills of looking into values, this actually keeps me really immersed into like hunting them and looking for them.
Yeah. There are a lot of little things. I think this is why it can tend to take me a long time sometimes. It's like I go around the painting and I'm like, I try to be pretty thoughtful about every square inch, probably to a fault, because I'm sure that there are many areas that I spend too much time on that don't matter that much. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these things, like I'm thinking about like this area and how this little brushstroke comes in and like defines, like, you're like, oh, I know the shape of that leaf. And I know that this leaf is getting like it's a little bit kind of going into a little bit of a shadow right before it pops back up and now it's in the light again. Like these are things that I don't get it right the first time. It usually takes me several tries before I realize like, oh, this is how this needs to sort of play out. But then this leaf was kind of weird in the setup.
It's a funny angle, but you capture it just right. Like even that little tip, like that little, yeah, beautiful. I love that. That's
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I didn't really do much to it. I didn't put a lot of information in this one. And I
mhm.
think part of it was like, I was like, I think it's better left unsaid because it is in a little bit of a weird position. If I were to like define all of the like the shape and everything of that leaf, it might actually be too much. Although, I don't know. I'm looking at it now and I'm like, maybe this could have been a little bit darker right here just to show that like it's, but I don't, it's fine. Cause like usually when I look at this painting, I don't look at this leaf. And that's kind of what it is intended. Like it's intended to not say much because it's a lot more important to be, it's kind of like moving around here. And these are more important. So they have more information and detail. So, and like here, I kept it flat, not much information. And then with like just a couple brush strokes, it's like, oh, and then the light hits for a second there. I was talking a little bit earlier about gradients and like transitioning. And I think that there were a lot of new techniques that I was playing with that have stuck around. Before that, I was doing a lot more like I would do one brush stroke and then pick up new paint and then do another one. But I started to do more like pick up paint and like let that paint kind of move down the canvas. I did this over here too. And I think I was starting to kind of play with it here to soften all these marks and shapes. And I don't know, I kind of got excited about it. I was like, ooh, this is fun. And I kept doing it after this painting. So I guess that's something I learned from this piece was like, because everything was so soft, the light was so soft. And the painting did not want to have a bunch of like chunky brush strokes, which is how my work, I think, was looking before
Mhm.
that. And I was like, how do I do this? Like, how do I soften things more? Didn't feel natural, but it was a good way to practice that. So I guess that seems like it's everything that we probably have to say about this painting. I think in future videos that we do, there will be more process. This one I think actually had limited process, but it's such a fun piece. It got me out of my studio. I just felt like it was a nice one to start with. If anyone who watches this video has any question that I can address in the next one, let me know.